This story begins far from the world most people know, far from cities, far from roads, far from the sound of another human voice. Out in the Atlantic Ocean, beyond the coast of Scotland, stand a group of small islands known as the Flannan Isles. They are little more than rocks rising from the sea, cold, wind-beaten, lonely. Even today, few people ever visit them. More than a century ago, almost nobody did. Imagine spending weeks there. No newspapers, no visitors, no crowds. Only the endless sound of waves crashing against stone, the same horizon every morning, the same darkness every night, and a lighthouse watching over it all. For 3 men, this was home. Their job was simple: keep the light burning, watch the sea, wait for the next supply ship. But in December of 1900, something happened on those islands. Something so strange that people still talk about it today. Because one day, 3 lighthouse keepers disappeared and nobody ever found them again. To understand the mystery, you first have to understand the place. The Flannan Isles were isolated. Not isolated in the way a small town is isolated. Truly isolated. The nearest signs of everyday life were far across the sea. When storms arrived, the islands could feel completely cut off from the rest of the world. And storms arrived often. The lighthouse had been built only a few years earlier. Ships passing through these waters needed guidance. The Atlantic could be unforgiving. Strong winds, hidden rocks, sudden weather changes. The lighthouse became a guardian standing against all of it. Every night its beam swept across the darkness, a promise that someone was there watching, waiting, keeping the light alive. 3 men worked there at a time: James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, Donna MacArthur. 3 ordinary men, 3 experienced keepers. They knew the weather. They knew the ocean. And they knew the risks that came with living on the islands. Life followed a routine. Wake up, maintain the lighthouse, record observations, check equipment, prepare meals, watch the weather, repeat, day after day, week after week. The same rhythm, the same responsibilities. For some people, such a life would feel unbearable. For lighthouse keepers, it was normal, because routine creates comfort, especially in places where nature can become dangerous without warning. And nowhere was that more true than the Atlantic Ocean. As December arrived, winter tightened its grip on the islands. The days became shorter, the nights became longer. The ocean grew darker, the wind colder. The keepers continued their work. The lighthouse remained active. Its beam still cut through the darkness each night. To passing ships, everything appeared normal. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed wrong. But then the weather began to change. Storms moved across the Atlantic. Powerful winds battered the islands. Huge waves crashed against the cliffs. The ocean became restless, violent, unpredictable. Inside the lighthouse, the keepers continued their duties. There was little choice. The sea did not care whether a man was tired. The weather did not care whether a man was afraid. The work had to continue. And then something happened. We don't know exactly what. Nobody does, because after that point, the story becomes silent. No final letter, no final message, no explanation, only questions. And those questions remain unanswered to this day. On December 26, 1900, a relief ship finally approached the islands. It had been delayed by bad weather. The crew expected a normal arrival. They expected to see the lighthouse. They expected to be greeted by the keepers. They expected routine. Instead, they found something strange. The lighthouse was dark. No signal came from the island. No one waited at the landing area. No one stood outside to welcome them. At first, it seemed unusual. Then it became worrying. Then it became something else entirely, because the island felt empty, and nobody knew why. One crew member was sent ashore to investigate. As he climbed toward the lighthouse, the silence became impossible to ignore. No voices, no movement, no signs of life, only the wind. When, He reached the building. The door was closed. Nothing appeared damaged. Nothing appeared broken. The lighthouse itself seemed perfectly normal, and yet something felt wrong. He entered. The rooms were empty. No keepers, no conversation, no footsteps, nothing. The beds had been slept in. The kitchen showed signs of recent use. A meal had been prepared. The clock had stopped. But the men themselves were gone. Imagine entering a place where people should be. A place that clearly was not abandoned long ago. A place that still feels lived in. And finding nobody, not a single person, not a single explanation. The search began immediately. The lighthouse, the surrounding buildings, the pass outside, the cliffs, the shoreline. Nothing. The three men had vanished. No bodies were found, no signs of violence, no evidence of a struggle, no indication that strangers had arrived on the island. Only absence, and sometimes absence can be more unsettling than evidence. As investigators examined the lighthouse, several details stood out. Details that would later become famous. One report suggested that one of the keepers had left behind his oilskin coat. This was unusual. Experienced lighthouse keepers knew the weather. They knew how dangerous the ocean could become. Leaving the lighthouse during a storm without proper protection made little sense. Outside, another clue was discovered. The western landing area had suffered significant damage. Equipment had been displaced. Ropes had been torn loose. Storage boxes had been moved from their positions. The sea had clearly been violent, very violent. This immediately raised a possibility. Perhaps one man had gone outside to secure equipment. Perhaps something had gone wrong. Perhaps the others rushed out to help. And perhaps the ocean took all three of them. It was a reasonable explanation. But it wasn't the only one, because mysteries have a way of growing larger than their evidence. And the Flannan Isles mystery was no exception. As news spread, theories began to appear, some practical, some imaginative, and some completely impossible. People searched for answers. They wanted certainty, a final explanation, something they could point to and say, this is what happened. But certainty never arrived. The most widely accepted theory remains simple. A powerful wave struck the landing area. One keeper was caught in danger. The others rushed to help. All three were swept into the sea. The Atlantic Ocean is capable of incredible force. Waves can appear suddenly. Conditions can change in moments. On remote islands like the Flannan Isles, a single mistake can become fatal. Many historians believe this explanation is the most likely. And perhaps they are right. But there is one reason the story continues to fascinate people. Nobody witnessed what happened. Nobody survived to tell the story. The final moments remain hidden, somewhere between the lighthouse and the sea, somewhere inside a storm that ended more than a century ago. And because of that, the imagination takes over. Stories began to grow. Whispers about strange events, unusual sightings, unexplained disappearances. Legends often appear where answers are missing. The Flannan Isles became one of those places, not because of what people knew, but because of what they didn't. More than a century has passed since the disappearance of the three lighthouse keepers. The world has changed. Ships navigate with satellites. Weather can be tracked from space. Communication crosses oceans in seconds, and yet the mystery remains. Nobody knows exactly what James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur experienced during their final hours. Nobody knows what they saw. Nobody knows what they said to each other. Nobody knows what happened after they left the safety of the lighthouse. Perhaps the answer really is simple. Perhaps a storm caught them at the wrong moment. Perhaps a single decision led them towards the sea. Perhaps the Atlantic claimed them as it has claimed countless others. Or perhaps there are details that disappeared with them, details the ocean never returned. Because the sea has always been good at keeping secrets. Even today, the Flannan Isles remain isolated. The cliffs still stand above the water, the wind still moves across the rocks. The waves still crash against the shore, and the lighthouse still watches over the Atlantic. Imagine standing there alone, looking across the endless ocean, knowing that somewhere in that landscape, 3 men simply vanished. No final goodbye, no witness, no explanation. Some stories end with answers. This one never did. That is why people still remember it. Not because it was the greatest mystery, not because it was the most dramatic, but because it reminds us of something simple. There are places in this world where nature does not explain itself. Places where questions remain unanswered. Places where a story can survive longer than the people who lived it. The names of the 3 keepers remain. The lighthouse remains. The islands remain. But the truth may have disappeared into the Atlantic long ago, and perhaps that is where it will stay. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, beyond the storm, beyond the reach of memory, the ocean keeps its silence, and the mystery of the Flannan Isles remains unfinished.